I remained silent throughout her entire 22-minute tirade. I simply spread out the property deed and observed 43 homeowners discover they'd been crossing my private street without permission. Imagine this scene. HOA chairwoman Sandra positioned behind that lectern, brandishing a $65,000 invoice for my illegal infrastructure modifications, explaining to 55 neighbors how I was decimating their home values. She possessed the slideshow, the fraudulent contractor assessments, and had even enlisted 4 attorneys to coerce me into surrender. This individual had dedicated 8 months to tormenting me, measuring my lawn with literal measuring tapes, penalizing me because my son's vehicle was allegedly positioned incorrectly in my personal driveway, threatening property condemnation simply because I had repaired hazardous road craters. Using my personal funds, what Sandra remained unaware of was that every luxury vehicle in that lot had traveled across my private land to arrive there. The street causing her such concern belonged to me through inheritance from my late grandfather, who had originally constructed this entire community. How would you respond if your homeowners association fined you for maintaining your own land? Share your wildest neighbor experience in the comments. I promise you have stories to tell. Allow me to step back and provide some context. I'm Michael Thompson, 49 years old, a retired structural engineer who believed he had located the ideal peaceful community to reconstruct his existence. Following a difficult separation that made me question my life choices, I purchased a simple colonial home in Cedar Ridge subdivision during 2020. The attractive features included excellent educational facilities for my 16-year-old daughter Sarah's alternating weekend stays, tree-covered boulevards, and what appeared to be a sensible HOA that genuinely maintained community standards. Cedar Ridge subdivision exists like an isolated pocket of suburban aspirations. 43 residences constructed during the late 1980s and early 1990s, linked to the broader world through one serpentine thoroughfare named Oak Valley Drive. When I initially relocated here, the population consisted primarily of founding families, working-class individuals who had raised children here and recognized their neighbors personally. However, during recent years, urban development had infiltrated gradually like spreading vines. Technology professionals and property speculators began purchasing homes, removing gardens to install surveillance systems, transforming friendly driveway conversations into anonymous complaint app reports. Enter Sandra Mitchell. People addressed her as Sandy, though she possessed all the warmth of a traffic citation. 45 years old, mortgage broker, operated a silver Lexus that she positioned at identical angles daily, perpetually wearing athletic wear and designer sunglasses even inside buildings, as though constantly en route to some crucial appointment regarding her importance. Sandy relocated to our community during 2021 and immediately designated herself as the community compliance supervisor, describing someone who genuinely measured grass lengths using actual rulers. Her spouse, David, worked as some form of corporate accountant, reserved individual who appeared to spend considerable time making excuses for his wife's conduct. They had no children, providing Sandy abundant opportunity to concentrate on everyone else's affairs. The entire conflict began during spring 2025. We had endured a severe winter that transformed Oak Valley Drive into lunar terrain. Craters sufficiently deep to swallow small pets, sections where the pavement had simply surrendered and disintegrated into loose stones. The harsh grinding of vehicle undercarriages scraping asphalt became our community's unofficial background noise. Being an engineer, I recognized this deterioration would only worsen. I composed a respectful message to the HOA leadership offering to organize professional restoration work. Sandy's reply arrived within 45 minutes. All alterations require board authorization and appropriate permits. 8 weeks passed with no board session scheduled. The street conditions continued deteriorating. Mrs. Rodriguez, the delightful 81-year-old residing 4 houses away, nearly stumbled into a pothole while retrieving her newspaper. That incident convinced me action was necessary. I contacted my construction associate Luis, someone who permanently smelled of machinery oil and espresso, and we devoted a weekend properly addressing the most dangerous areas: premium materials, correct preparation techniques, comprehensive work. The expense totaled $2,800 from my personal savings, but at least residents could navigate safely again. Neighbors expressed immediate appreciation. Multiple individuals offered reimbursement. I shared before and after photographs in our community social media group, hoping this might motivate the board to finally address the street comprehensively. That decision became my initial error. Within 2 days, I discovered a formal legal notice in my mailbox. The sharp sound of certified delivery, arriving at my doorstep at 7:30 a.m. should have warned me what was approaching. Sandy accused me of unauthorized infrastructure alterations and threatened litigation. She claimed my repairs violated HOA visual standards and demanded I remove all materials and return everything to its original state. Original state? Meaning the dangerous craters that pose legitimate safety hazards? The community social media forum erupted. Longtime residents supported my actions. They remembered when neighbors assisted neighbors, but newer affluent residents aligned with Sandy. Regulations exist for reasons, they declared. I realized I had inadvertently initiated economic warfare in suburbia. The stale coffee aroma at the emergency HOA gathering should have indicated everything I needed to understand about what awaited me. Sandy convened an urgent HOA board meeting for 3 p.m. on a Wednesday. Naturally, when employed people are actually working. Only 3 of 5 board members attended, which apparently constituted sufficient representation in Sandy's interpretation. I entered that community hall meeting space to discover Sandy positioned as though prosecuting major criminal charges. She had created a presentation slideshow, genuinely titled, Community Infrastructure Violations, a Detailed Analysis. She had printed photographs of my street work from every conceivable perspective, complete with red indicators highlighting what she termed unauthorized alterations. This individual, she announced, avoiding my name entirely, has generated significant insurance liabilities and endangers our property values through unsanctioned repairs. She claimed my work failed community aesthetic requirements, which seemed ironic, considering I had utilized superior materials compared to the original pavement. The board voted 3-0 to fine me $750 for unauthorized modifications, plus $150 daily, until the repairs were professionally eliminated. Apparently, filling dangerous potholes constituted a violation requiring daily penalties. Here's the unexpected development. I decided to respond with evidence. I appeared at the subsequent scheduled board meeting carrying a complete engineering assessment, traffic analysis data, safety evaluation, material specifications, everything comprehensive. The room overflowed with neighbors, primarily supportive ones who were exhausted from avoiding craters during their daily travels. I'm offering to contribute this work to the HOA, I stated calmly. You simply need to approve it retroactively. These repairs surpass municipal street standards. Sandy's response involved producing her own engineering assessment, and this becomes interesting. From her brother-in-law, whose only credentials involved landscape maintenance. His professional evaluation was literally written on gardening service letterhead. Yet Sandy persisted. She increased my penalty to $200 plus $400 daily. Here's the remarkable part. She established a new emergency procedure requiring all future repairs to utilize HOA-approved contractors. Care to guess the sole approved contractor? David's golf partner who charged triple standard rates. My daughter Sarah, who's 17 and far more technologically capable than her father, assisted me in creating a comprehensive presentation exposing the fraudulent engineering assessment. We presented it at the following meeting, and the room's collective reaction when we displayed the landscaper's credentials alongside Sandy's claims was audible. 3 board members resigned that evening from sheer mortification. However, Sandy scrambled to recruit replacement board members from her affluent neighbors, promising them property value protection. Within 14 days, she had assembled a board filled with her supporters, and they intensified everything. They maintained the penalties and added investigation fees to my bill. That's when I understood this wasn't actually about street repair. This concerned control. This involved a small individual with limited authority, attempting to force someone from the community because they dared question her power. Other neighbors began approaching me privately, sharing their own nightmare experiences. Sandy had cited individuals for possessing incorrect beige paint shades. She had measured fence heights using measuring tapes. She had penalized an elderly military veteran for displaying his flag beyond sunset. This woman was intoxicated with authority, and I had accidentally become the symbol of resistance to her suburban dictatorship. Here's something I discovered that might assist you if you encounter similar situations. HOAs can require you to post bonds equaling disputed amounts if you wish to contest their penalties. It's a legal strategy designed to bankrupt people into compliance before they can defend themselves. Always research your state's HOA dispute resolution procedures before engaging in extended conflicts. Understanding financial requirements in advance can prevent unpleasant surprises. By this point, I faced $4,500 in penalties and increasing by $400 daily. The pleasant smell of fresh asphalt from my street repairs had long disappeared, replaced by the bitter taste of injustice every time I drove over the smooth sections I had created. But here's what Sandy didn't realize. I'm an engineer. We don't merely fix problems, we solve them methodically. I was about to begin very systematic research into exactly who possessed authority to do what in our community because something about this entire situation seemed wrong. When an engineer becomes curious about property records and legal documents, things tend to become very interesting. Sandy's harassment campaign intensified significantly. She began driving past my residence multiple times daily in that silver Lexus, decelerating to photograph my property like some suburban private detective. The soft whir of her car window lowering became my personal soundtrack of anxiety. She cited me for grass slightly exceeding the 4-inch maximum. Yes, she actually knelt down with a ruler. She penalized me for Sarah's car being positioned improperly in my own driveway, apparently because it extended 8 inches over some invisible boundary only she could perceive. Then she reported me to municipal authorities for possible unpermitted driveway modifications, even though I hadn't touched my driveway in 6 years. But I don't accept harassment passively. I installed security cameras and began documenting everything. That's when I discovered something remarkable: selective enforcement. Sandy's wealthy friends possessed identical violations she completely ignored. Incorrect paint colors, oversized mailboxes, vehicles parked exactly like Sarah's was. I created a database. Engineers appreciate databases, demonstrating the clear pattern of prejudice. That's when Mrs. Rodriguez approached my door one evening, bringing homemade pastries that smelled like vanilla and courage. She had observed the entire situation developing, and she possessed something to share with me. Sandy attempted to force me to remove my vegetable garden, she said quietly. The one my late husband planted 35 years ago before he passed. She claimed it was non-indigenous species and created excessive maintenance responsibilities. Mrs. Rodriguez's hands trembled slightly as she spoke. But I still possess all the original HOA documents from when we moved here. Would you like to examine them? Here's the unexpected twist that changed everything. Mrs. Rodriguez's deceased husband had been among the original HOA founding members. She possessed copies of every agreement, every modification, every board meeting record dating back to 1984. When I spread those documents across my kitchen table, I realized most of Sandy's current regulations had never been properly approved. The original HOA was actually quite reasonable. Basic requirements about not allowing your yard to become a junkyard, maintaining quiet after 11 p.m. All these detailed regulations about grass height and paint colors were added gradually by different boards over years, many without proper community approval. But I needed to investigate deeper. I spent the following weekend at the municipal recorder's office examining property records and utility easements. That musty smell of old books and bureaucracy became my cologne for approximately 12 hours straight. That's where I discovered something intriguing about our subdivision's development history. The original developer had retained ownership of several key parcels when the community was constructed. Most were sold eventually, but the street, Oak Valley Drive, had a more complicated history. When the original developers company declared bankruptcy in 1998, their assets were sold at auction to satisfy creditors. The street ownership transferred to some holding company I had never heard of. That holding company dissolved in 2003, and their assets transferred to, well, this becomes good. Thompson Development Corporation, same surname as mine, same surname as my grandfather Robert, who had been a modest property investor before his death in 2019. I rushed home and began examining the boxes of paperwork grandfather Robert had left me, materials I had been intending to organize but never accomplished. Somewhere in that collection of yellowed documents and musty folders was a deed that would change everything. Meanwhile, Sandy escalated her campaign. My penalties reached $9,200 and were climbing daily. She threatened to place a lien on my house and scheduled a community standards hearing with municipal officials. Her plan was obvious: bankrupt me into submission or have my property condemned. But while she was plotting my destruction, I was experiencing the biggest revelation of my adult life. Buried in Grandfather Robert's estate paperwork was a deed to Oak Valley Drive private roadway easement. Every single vehicle that entered our community, including Sandy's precious Lexus, was traveling across property that I had inherited. Here's a knowledge nugget that might amaze you. Private road easements are completely different from public rights-of-way. When you own a private road, you can actually control who uses it, establish maintenance requirements, and even charge fees. Always research actual property boundaries and easements before assuming roads are public. Many subdivisions have surprising private ownership structures that can completely alter your legal position. I sat in my kitchen that night holding the deed in hands that were shaking with a mixture of disbelief and righteous anger. Sandy had been penalizing me for maintaining my own property. First thing the next morning, I called a real estate attorney. I needed someone to confirm what I was seeing because this seemed too fortunate to be true. 3 days later, sitting in her office that smelled like leather-bound legal texts and expensive coffee, I received the confirmation that made my heart race. Mr. Thompson, you definitely own that road. The title chain is clear, and you've been legally responsible for its maintenance all along. The HOA never had any authority to regulate it. But here's what I didn't do. Immediately marched to Sandy's house and waved the deed in her face because Sandy was about to provide me something much better than a quick victory. She was about to destroy herself with her own rope. She raised my total penalties to $1,800 and scheduled an emergency community meeting to discuss the problem resident. She even invited the local television news crew to cover what she called a community dispute. This woman actually believed having cameras present would support her case. The meeting was packed. Over 35 neighbors attended, plus the Channel 5 news team with their bright lights that made everything feel like a small-town congressional hearing. Sandy had prepared a 25-minute slideshow about maintaining community standards, complete with enlarged photographs of my street work, labeled as unauthorized modifications. This resident's defiance threatens everyone's property values, she declared to the cameras, gesturing at me like I was some kind of common criminal. We need community support for necessary enforcement action. I sat quietly in the back row, taking notes and letting her dig her hole deeper. The room was becoming uncomfortable. You could feel the tension in how people shifted in their plastic chairs and avoided eye contact. Here's the unexpected twist. Instead of defending myself, I requested permission to respond to her accusations. Sandy, probably expecting some kind of desperate apology, smugly agreed. I walked to the front of the room carrying a folder of documents and unfolded a surveyor's map on the table. The room went completely silent except for the hum of the news camera. Before we discuss road violations, I said calmly, let's clarify who actually owns the road. The expression on Sandy's face when I displayed the deed was priceless. Pure shock, like someone had just informed her that unicorns were real and they were suing her for trespassing. I explained everything clearly. I had inherited the road from Grandfather Robert. Every resident had been using my private property for access, and I'd been maintaining their route at my own expense for years. The municipal official who had attended asked to examine the documents and confirmed they appeared authentic. The HOA never had authority to regulate my private road, I continued. I've been subsidizing this community's infrastructure while being penalized for improving my own property. Sandy's desperate response was to claim the documents were fabricated or irrelevant. She insisted the HOA had established authority and threatened to have the county investigate my fraud. But you could see in her eyes that she knew the game had just changed completely. The reasonable neighbors immediately understood what this meant. Several approached me afterward, thanking me for maintaining the road and apologizing for not speaking up during the harassment campaign. About 12 residents left with Sandy, but the majority stayed to hear my proposal. I'm offering an Oak Valley Road cooperative agreement, I said. Residents pay a modest monthly fee for professional maintenance. I retain ownership but commit to community input. We end the current penalties and legal threats and everyone gets a properly maintained road. Sandy refused to consider any compromise. She stormed out screaming that this wasn't finished and threatening to sue me for extortion. Me thousands in legal fees. HOAs cannot self-enforce liens without actual court judgments. Many HOA threats are legally meaningless bluffs designed to intimidate homeowners who don't understand their rights. If your HOA threatens liens, demand to see actual court orders. Many associations rely on fear tactics rather than legitimate legal authority. I gave the community 1 week to respond to my proposal. Within 4 days, I had received calls from over 18 interested neighbors. Mrs. Rodriguez organized a road cooperative information meeting, while Sandy held a competing defense strategy meeting with her remaining supporters. The battle lines were drawn, but for the first time since this entire mess started, I held all the cards, but owning the road was just the beginning. When I really examined Grandfather Robert's paperwork, spreading everything across my dining room table like some kind of property detective, I discovered something that made the road ownership look like small change. Grandfather Robert hadn't just owned the road. His company, Thompson Development Corporation, had originally developed the entire Cedar Ridge subdivision back in the 1980s. Every lot, every utility easement, every carefully planned curve in our suburban paradise, Grandfather Robert had designed it all. The road wasn't just private property. It had been specifically designed as a private access point to maximize the value of every lot in the community. It was never intended to be public or HOA controlled. Grandfather Robert had kept ownership intentionally, both for liability protection and to maintain quality standards. My real estate attorney explained the full scope of what I had inherited. As the road owner, I could legally control access, establish usage rules, and even charge maintenance fees. The only restriction was that I couldn't suddenly strand existing residents without reasonable notice, but I had essentially unlimited authority over my own property. Here's the financial reality that amazed me. Over 30 years, road maintenance had cost approximately $165,000. My recent $2,800 repair job had increased property values by an estimated $18,000 per home. Simple mathematics, the community's 43 homes had collectively benefited by over $650,000. From my work alone, Mrs. Rodriguez filled in the historical context that made everything make sense. The original HOA had been genuinely cooperative, focused on basic community maintenance and neighbor relations. Grandfather Robert used to coordinate road work through HOA communications, and everyone contributed fairly. Your grandfather was a decent man, Mrs. Rodriguez told me over tea that tasted like jasmine and justice. He never made anyone feel like they owed him, even though legally they did. Sandy's regime represents a hostile takeover of what used to be a real community. The power shift in my mind was like switching on floodlights. I had been approaching this completely backwards. I wasn't a resident subject to HOA rules about the road. I was a property owner whose asset was being regulated by his customers. Those 43 homes depended entirely on my private road for access, and I had been too polite to acknowledge my leverage. But here's what really bothered me. I had been subsidizing these people's infrastructure while they penalized me for the privilege. The HOA budget showed zero allocation for road maintenance because they had been freeloading on my inheritance for years. I made a strategic decision that night. I could have gone nuclear immediately, posted private road and no trespassing signs, and locked down access until people paid up. But that's not who I am. I wanted to solve this problem fairly, not destroy the community out of spite. My plan was simple. Educate the community about the true ownership structure, offer a reasonable compromise, and escalate to access restrictions only if the harassment continued. This was about respect and fairness, not revenge. I scheduled a professional surveyor to mark the exact road boundaries and ordered proper signage indicating private road status. I researched insurance implications and consulted with a traffic lawyer about proper procedures. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it correctly. The emotional turning point for me was realizing I could actually protect other neighbors from Sandy's tyranny. Mrs. Rodriguez's vegetable garden, the veteran's flag, all the petty harassment. I had the power to end it by ending Sandy's authority over the road that made her little kingdom possible. I shifted from defensive victim to empowered property owner. But with great power comes great responsibility, and I was determined to use this leverage wisely. The next week felt like preparing for the most important presentation of my life. My attorney walked me through every detail of private road owner rights and responsibilities. I could legally post signage, control hours, restrict certain vehicles, and charge maintenance fees. The catch: I had to provide reasonable access to existing residents and couldn't suddenly strand people without proper legal notice. I hired a professional surveyor to confirm the exact boundaries. Every inch mattered if this was going to court. Watching him work with that precise electronic equipment, beeping and measuring while neighbors pretended not to stare from their windows, felt like drawing battle lines with scientific precision. The traffic engineer I consulted calculated fare usage fees based on actual vehicle counts. He sat at the road entrance for 4 days, clicking one of those handheld counters every time a car passed. The metallic click, click, click became the soundtrack of data gathering. His conclusion? $45 per month per household would more than cover professional maintenance, snow removal, and emergency repairs. Sarah turned into my secret weapon for community outreach. She created a neighborhood social media group called Fair HOA Governance and started documenting the harassment timeline with photos and screenshots. My daughter has this gift for making complex legal matters sound reasonable, and her post began attracting supporters I didn't even know I had. "Dad, look at this," she said, showing me her laptop screen filled with comments. "Mrs. Peterson says Sandy penalized her for having the wrong mailbox numbers. Mr. Garcia got cited for his kid's sidewalk chalk drawings on his own driveway. This woman is insane. I designed an educational presentation explaining the road ownership history, complete with maps, photographs, and a simple FAQ. My engineering background was helpful. I knew how to make technical information digestible. The key was showing people this wasn't about money or revenge. It was about ending the harassment and creating a sustainable solution. The financial analysis was eye-opening. I calculated that over the years I had essentially been subsidizing the community's infrastructure to the tune of about $125 per household per month. My proposed $45 fee was actually a bargain compared to typical HOA road assessments. Mrs. Rodriguez introduced me to other longtime residents who had been quietly suffering under Sandy's regime. Luis, the contractor, offered to donate materials and labor if needed. The attorney provided continued guidance on legal procedures. Even the traffic engineer offered to testify about professional road standards if necessary. My contingency planning covered every scenario I could imagine. If education failed, I would escalate to formal usage agreements. If harassment continued, I would restrict access during specific hours. If legal threats persisted, I would countersue for harassment and defamation. The nuclear option, complete access restriction, was legally possible but would take careful coordination with emergency services. Here's a knowledge nugget that could save you money if you're ever dealing with shared infrastructure. Private road maintenance cooperatives can actually provide tax advantages through proper structuring. Shared infrastructure costs may qualify for certain business deductions if organized correctly. When dealing with private road disputes, research cooperative ownership structures and tax implications. Sometimes financial benefits can motivate better solutions than legal threats. The timing strategy was crucial. I decided to wait for Sandy's next escalation before revealing my full hand. This would maximize the impact and give the community a clear choice between her authoritarian approach and my cooperative solution. I practiced staying calm under pressure, knowing Sandy would likely have an explosive reaction. My goal was to focus on solutions, not blame, and give the community a real chance to choose cooperation over conflict. The psychological preparation was just as important as the legal preparation. I had to accept that some level of conflict was unavoidable. Sandy had built her entire community identity around controlling others, and she wouldn't give that up easily. But I also prepared for the possibility that this could heal the community. If we could establish a fair, transparent system for road maintenance, it might become a model for handling other shared expenses. Maybe we could even restore some of the neighborly cooperation that Mrs. Rodriguez remembered from the early days. The surveyor finished his work on a Wednesday, planting small flags every 40 feet along the road boundaries. The sharp smell of spray paint marking property lines mixed with the scent of honeysuckle from Mrs. Rodriguez's garden, a strange combination of legal precision and natural beauty. Thursday morning, I had professional signs ready to install. Private road, Thompson Development Corporation owner, authorized access only, usage agreements required. But I held off on putting them up. I said nothing publicly. Just went about my business, letting Sandy dig her hole deeper while I quietly prepared the nuclear option. My attorney filed a motion to dismiss the lien. Turns out you can't just declare debts and force property sales without actual court judgments. But I didn't announce that victory yet. The professional survey stakes were still planted along the road boundaries like little flags of impending doom. I had the private road signs ready in my garage, but I wanted Sandy to commit fully to her course of destruction before I revealed my trump card. Meanwhile, the community was fracturing. Several neighbors approached me privately with apologies and their own horror stories. Mr. Garcia told me Sandy had threatened to fine him for his children drawing with chalk on their own driveway. Mrs. Peterson got cited for having the wrong style mailbox numbers, even though they had been there for 18 years. She's lost her mind, Mrs. Peterson whispered to me at the grocery store, glancing around like Sandy might be hiding behind the cereal boxes. But we're all scared to speak up because she retaliates against anyone who crosses her. Here's the unexpected twist that showed just how desperate Sandy was getting. I discovered through Sarah's social media detective work that Sandy's husband David was facing an ethics investigation. His accounting practice was being accused of overcharging HOA clients and potentially kickback schemes with preferred contractors. Sandy was using her HOA presidency to generate business for David's firm, creating a massive conflict of interest. The same emergency protocols that required expensive approved contractors. David was getting accounting fees from those companies. The inflated penalties and legal threats, more billable hours for his practice. But I held on to this information. Sometimes the best weapon is the one you don't use yet. Sandy's media blitz backfired spectacularly. Her interview about maintaining community standards made her look petty and vindictive, especially when she claimed I represented a property value threat while standing next to the beautifully maintained road I had fixed with my own money. Local small business owners started reaching out to support me. They dealt with similar petty authority abuse from city councils and permit offices. Luis the contractor offered to organize other tradespeople to help with road maintenance. A local restaurant owner offered to cater the next community meeting for free. The social media war was heating up too. Sarah's Fair HOA governance group had gained over 180 members, including people from other communities sharing their own HOA horror stories. Sandy's supporters created a competing property standards protection group, but their posts just made them look more unreasonable. That's when Sandy made her biggest mistake yet. She organized a petition to remove the problem resident and started spreading rumors about my personal life and finances. She told people I was probably laundering money through fake road repairs and suggested I was behind on my mortgage payments. The whisper campaign was the final straw. When you attack someone's character based on lies, you've crossed from petty harassment into something much more serious. I made my decision. Friday evening, I sent a simple email to every household in the community. Community meeting Sunday 1 p.m. Important information about road ownership. No details, no threats, just a calm invitation to learn the truth. Sandy responded by scheduling her own competing meeting for the same time, calling it Emergency Action Against Problem Resident. She even invited county officials and local media, planning to have me publicly humiliated and possibly arrested for whatever charges she could dream up. The stage was set for the final confrontation. I had my attorney on standby, the surveyor ready with boundary documentation, and a folder full of evidence about Sandy's harassment campaign and her husband's ethics issues. But most importantly, I had the road ownership deed in my briefcase along with professional signs ready to install the moment I chose to end this charade. Sunday was going to be very interesting, and this time I wasn't going to let Sandy control the narrative. Sunday arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that makes everything feel like destiny. Both meetings were scheduled for 1 p.m. at the community center. Sandy's Emergency Action Against Problem Resident versus my simple, important information about road ownership. I arrived 25 minutes early with my attorney, the surveyor, and a briefcase full of documentation. The parking lot was already filling up with cars, and I could see neighbors choosing sides by which entrance they used. The tension was thick enough to cut with a surveyor stake. Sandy had gone full drama queen. She had set up a projector, invited the Channel 5 news crew again, and somehow convinced a county code enforcement officer and a sheriff's deputy to attend. Her plan was obviously to have me arrested, or at least publicly humiliated on live television. The room was packed. Over 55 people, the largest gathering in community history. Sandy had claimed the podium and was already in full performance mode when I walked in. She had prepared another slideshow, this one titled, "Protecting Our Community from Fraudulent Residents." For 25 minutes, she ranted about my unauthorized road modifications, showed enlarged photos of my work, and claimed my defiance was threatening everyone's property values. She even brought props, a ruler for measuring grass height and printed copies of fake violations she had invented. "This resident," she declared, pointing directly at me like I was a war criminal, "has shown complete disregard for our community's standards. Today we vote to ban him from all common areas and pursue criminal charges for fraud and property destruction." The applause was scattered and uncomfortable. You could feel the room's mood shifting as people realized how unhinged this had become. When Sandy finally finished her theatrical performance, she smugly offered me a chance to respond, probably expecting some kind of desperate plea for mercy. Instead, I stood up calmly, walked to the front of the room, and placed my surveyor's boundary map on the table where everyone could see it. "Before we discuss road violations," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent room, "let's clarify who actually owns the road we're talking about." The unexpected twist that ended everything. I unfolded the original development deed and inheritance documentation, showing how Oak Valley Drive had never been public property. Every single resident, including Sandy, had been using my private road for access without permission or payment. I inherited this road from my grandfather, who developed this entire subdivision in the 1980s. For the past 4 years, I've been maintaining your access route at my own expense while being penalized for improving my own property. The county official asked to examine the documents. The surveyor confirmed the boundaries. The sheriff's deputy looked increasingly uncomfortable as he realized Sandy had called him to a civil property dispute that was completely outside his jurisdiction. Sandy's response was pure desperation. She claimed my documents were fabricated, that I was running some kind of elaborate scam, and that the county needed to investigate me for fraud. But you could see in her eyes that she knew the game was over. I offered my reasonable solution one final time: a road cooperative where residents paid modest monthly fees for professional maintenance. I would retain ownership but commit to community input, fair, transparent, and beneficial to everyone. Sandy's meltdown was spectacular. She refused any compromise, screaming that I was blackmailing the community and threatening to sue everyone who cooperated with my extortion scheme. She actually used the word extortion to describe asking people to help pay for maintaining the road they used every day. When she realized the room wasn't buying her hysteria, she stormed out with her core supporters, yelling that this isn't over, and threatening to expose this fraud to the state attorney general. The door slamming behind her echoed through the suddenly quiet room like the end of a very long, very stupid war. Mrs. Rodriguez immediately stood up and started organizing the reasonable neighbors who wanted to discuss the cooperative proposal. About 32 households expressed serious interest. The county official confirmed that everything appeared legally proper and suggested we work out the details privately. The news crew interviewed both sides afterward. Sandy's on-camera rant about fraudulent residents and property theft made her look completely unhinged, while my calm explanation of inheritance and reasonable cost-sharing came across as totally sensible. That night, the story went viral on local social media. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive of my position, with dozens of people sharing their own HOA horror stories and praising me for finding a fair solution. But the real victory was walking outside after the meeting and seeing neighbors actually talking to each other again instead of hiding behind curtains and avoiding eye contact. For the first time in months, Cedar Ridge subdivision felt like a community instead of a war zone. I thought the Sunday meeting had ended things, but Sandy had one more card to play. She set a deadline for Friday at 4 p.m., demanding I cease all fraudulent claims or face full legal consequences. Her plan was to rally her remaining supporters for one final confrontation. Friday evening, I arrived at the community center parking lot with my attorney, surveyor, and a stack of professional private road Thompson Development Corporation signs ready to install. The setting sun cast long shadows across the asphalt as both factions gathered for what everyone knew would be the final showdown. Sandy had organized what she called a Save Our Community rally. Her supporters held handmade signs reading "Stop the Road Bully" and "Protect Our Rights." She had brought her husband David and 2 of his lawyer friends, clearly planning to intimidate me into Backing down through sheer legal firepower. The Channel 5 news crew was there again, along with a reporter from the county newspaper who had heard about the viral HOA dispute. A sheriff's deputy stood by to maintain order, though he looked like he would rather be anywhere else dealing with actual crimes. Mrs. Rodriguez, bless her heart, stepped forward to facilitate the discussion as our community's unofficial elder stateswoman. The smell of her jasmine perfume mixed with the autumn air and tension sweat from about 45 nervous neighbors. I presented my road cooperative proposal one final time. $45 per month per household for professional maintenance, transparent accounting, community input on major decisions, and a 5-year rate lock. Compared to typical HOA road assessments, it was actually a bargain. Sandy's counterattack was pure theater. She claimed my ownership was just a legal technicality, and that the community had established rights through decades of use. Her voice got higher and more shrill as she insisted I was trying to steal their road and extort honest families. "This man," she shrieked, pointing at me like I was some kind of monster, "is holding our entire community hostage. He's demanding we pay him for the privilege of driving to our own homes." Here's where Luis the contractor stepped up and delivered the perfect reality check. He explained the actual costs of road maintenance, showed photos of the deterioration before my repairs, and calculated how much money I had personally saved everyone over the years. "Michael's been subsidizing this whole community," Luis said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who actually knows construction. "That road would have cost us $45,000 to fix properly. He did it for under $3,000 and asked for nothing. I made my final offer, reducing the fee to $35 per month and including winter snow removal. I'm giving everyone until Sunday to decide. After that, I'll be installing private road signage and requiring usage agreements for all vehicles." That's when Sandy played her nuclear card. She announced that if anyone signed my extortion contract, she would personally sue them for conspiracy to commit fraud. She claimed she had found a way to build an alternate access road and that residents didn't need my criminal highway. The county official, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke up. "Ma'am, there are no available easements for alternate access. The surrounding properties are privately owned with no right-of-way provisions. The cost would exceed $1.8 million plus environmental permits, and it would take 2 to 4 years minimum." Sandy's face went through about 6 different shades of red as she realized her bluff had been called publicly and on camera. "I don't care what it costs," she screamed. "We will not be held hostage by this fraud." That's when I delivered my mic drop moment. "Mrs. Mitchell," I said calmly, "you've spent 8 months penalizing me for maintaining my own property, while your husband's accounting firm collected fees from every HOA enforcement action. You've harassed elderly residents, targeted families with children, and turned this community into a war zone. The only fraud here is your abuse of power." The crowd went dead silent. Even the news cameras seemed to focus more intently. "I'm offering a fair solution that benefits everyone. But if you prefer to build a $1.8 million road to avoid paying $35 a month, that's your choice. Just remember, you'll still need to cross my property to get to your construction site." The informal vote was swift and decisive. 32 households supported the cooperative agreement. 6 were undecided, and only Sandy's core group of 5 households rejected it outright. Saturday morning, I installed the professional signage. Private road authorized access-only signs went up at both ends of Oak Valley Drive with a 30-day grace period notice for current residents to finalize usage agreements. Sandy tried one last desperate gambit, organizing neighbors to remove the signs and calling police to report vandalism of public property. The sheriff's deputy who responded took one look at my ownership documentation and politely explained to Sandy that I had every legal right to mark my own property. The media coverage that weekend showed a calm, reasonable property owner offering fair solutions versus a hysterical woman demanding impossible outcomes. Public opinion wasn't even close. 7 months later, Cedar Ridge subdivision is a completely different place. The Oak Valley Road Cooperative is officially incorporated with 34 participating households, paying their monthly fees through a simple online system. The road has never looked better. Professional maintenance, proper drainage, and even decorative plantings along the edges that Mrs. Rodriguez designed. Sandy's reign of terror ended exactly the way you would expect. She lost the HOA presidency in an emergency election 4 weeks after our showdown. Turns out when people aren't afraid of retaliation, they vote for sanity. Her husband David's accounting practice collapsed after the county ethics investigation found systematic overcharging and kickback schemes. The family quietly listed their house for sale within 7 months and moved to a different state. The ripple effects have been incredible. I receive emails from homeowners across the country facing similar HOA abuse, all looking for advice on fighting back. The local news did a follow-up story on HOA reform, and the county is actually considering new oversight requirements for community associations. Our case has been referenced in 4 different property rights lawsuits as an example of how private road cooperatives can work. But the real victory is seeing Mrs. Rodriguez's vegetable garden in full bloom again. With no fear of citation letters, she organized a community welcome committee that actually welcomes new residents instead of terrorizing them. Our annual road maintenance meeting has become a community social event where people plan block parties and coordinate babysitting swaps. Property values have increased an average of $14,000 per home since we established professional road maintenance. The road cooperative has built up a healthy reserve fund for future repairs. Everyone saves money compared to typical HOA assessments, and we get transparent accounting instead of mysterious administrative fees. The psychological transformation in the community is even more impressive than the financial benefits. People wave to each other again. Children play in the street without parents worrying about violation notices. The social media group Sarah created has evolved into genuine community organizing for positive projects. I never intended to become a community activist. This whole experience taught me that sometimes ordinary people have to stand up to bullies even when it's uncomfortable. I learned the power of documentation, patience, and building coalitions. Most importantly, I discovered that principled resistance can create positive change when you're fighting for something bigger than yourself. We've established the Fair HOA Advocacy Fund using some of the cooperative surplus funds. It provides legal resources for homeowners facing abuse and partners with the local legal aid society to offer educational workshops on property rights. 4 neighboring communities have adopted similar cooperative models after seeing our success. The legal precedent we set has helped other private road disputes get resolved through mediation instead of expensive litigation. Local government updated subdivision regulations to require clearer disclosure of private road ownership. Even HOA management companies have started emphasizing transparency and resident rights in their training programs. But my favorite outcome is watching Sarah, now a college sophomore studying public administration, use this experience in her coursework about grassroots organizing and community development. She's written papers on how ordinary citizens can effectively challenge institutional abuse, and she credits our road war with inspiring her career path. Last week, I got a call from a homeowner in the adjacent county dealing with a similar situation. Pool maintenance company monopoly with HOA board members getting kickbacks from overpriced contracts. Residents are facing huge special assessments while board members profit. I'm meeting with them next weekend to share our documentation strategies and cooperative model. The annual road maintenance meeting is next month, and Mrs. Rodriguez is organizing a community potluck to go with it. Luis, the contractor, is donating materials for some decorative stonework at the entrance. The cooperative voted to add bicycle lanes and improved lighting. We're planning a small festival in the fall to celebrate our 3rd anniversary. This is what community actually looks like when people choose cooperation over control, transparency over corruption, and fairness over fear. So here's my challenge to you. If you're dealing with HOA abuse, petty authoritarians, or any situation where someone's using a little bit of power to make your life miserable, fight back. Document everything. Research your rights. Build alliances. Don't let bullies win through intimidation. Drop a comment and share your own HOA nightmare story. Let's build a community of people who refuse to be pushed around by power-hungry neighbors.